Hi guys, my name is Marcel. Today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite Porsche generations, the 997. Admittedly, it's one of my favorites and one of the ones we're most comfortable with here. The particular model behind me is a Carrera S. They became this body style in 2005. And in the United States, it reached production until mid-2012. There's several nuances and different variations of them. 911s are a little confusing, especially if you're just starting to get in the market. You know, the one 911 could be $40,000, the other one could be $120,000, and a bunch of stuff in between. But there's so many trim levels to discuss and a lot of little nuances. This is where we come in and we're comfortable with the vehicles and we're comfortable with the brands. We know the pitfalls and we know some of the highlights of them. So walk with me as we kind of discuss this one to start off with. This particular model is an 08 Carrera S. S designation means a little bit more power. More power means it has a little bigger engine. So it goes from the Carrera standard engine, which is a 3.6 to a 3.8. It's all naturally aspirated, meaning there's no turbos or supercharged. So the car basically boasts a 7,000 RPM redline, goes to 355 horsepower. The Carrera model has a 320 to 330. It's somewhere in that range. You know, they changed little differences all throughout. 997 generation has two marks, which is Mark 1 and Mark 2. So two different generations, the 997.1 or 997.2. Their engine differences are going to be the most important and significant differences for these years, along with the transmission. For the automatic transmissions in the .2s, it becomes a PDK, which is a dual clutch transmission. It's kind of the most sought after automatic transmissions of these eras. So in this particular example, we have a traditional Carrera S. It's manual. It has a couple of high demand options. For example, the sports chrono option is one of the things most people look for. And you can tell it has a sports chrono package because it has a kind of traditional stopwatch on the center of the dash. Bose sound system is another thing people look for most of these vehicles. And that's because it has a subwoofer in the rear. You could tell on the parcel shelf, there's two outlets for the subwoofers. And so that's more or less how you could tell it has a Bose sound system. That, or you look at the door cards and you'll see the Bose insignia on both sides of the front doors. It's one way to tell as well. Another thing people look for on some of these, you get heated steering wheels, heated seats. Sunroof is mostly standard. If you have one without it, it's kind of rare and it actually condemns a premium. So there's all sorts of little weird things in the Porsche community. Wheels will also make a difference. This particular model has the turbo wheels. There's you know, the lobster claws, which is what BBS calls the 5-spoke with a hollow spoke in it, lighter weight wheels, if you will. The standard Carrera wheels, they're 18-inch wheels. On these, you usually get 19s on the Carrera S. If you walk around the vehicle, you kind of see the little differences in them, and I'll show you more or less what we're talking about here. Carrera S obviously has the badge right here, but one also distinguishable difference is that the exhaust is quad-tipped on the Carrera S, and it's actually dual tipped on the Carrera. So you have a big oval on each side if it's a Carrera. Carrera S will have the quad tips. One also definitive way to find out if you have a certain trim is if you pop the engine bay. Let's say you have no badges and you have no exhaust tips to go by. If you look under the engine bay, usually the 3.8 insignia is on the air box of the Carrera S's, and or 3.6 will face the regular Carreras. Also on the .1s, or the first generations of these cars, you can see there's a huge intake plenum, as opposed to the 2009 and later cars, which is the .2s. You can see the intake manifold is a little bit lower because they actually made the engine much more compact. One of the beautiful things about these cars, besides the engine being in the rear and the way the driving dynamics feel, is that once you start driving them, you could get a good idea what the car is going to feel like once you start braking and actually turning into corners. This will give you a good indication of how the suspension is, if the bushings are loose, if there's a little knocking noise, maybe a strut or a suspension control arm might need to be addressed. So those are things you want to be looking out for. But when you're shopping for your vehicle, you know, a lot of things need to click your box. If you like hardbacks, which are the racing seats that are not as easy to live with for comfort, then you'll be able to tell because they're silver painted in the back and they'll also be fixed. On these, the more touring cars, you'll see it has leather on the back and it'll be a kind of a more GT inspired type trim. So if you want the hardcore experience, you try to go for the racing seats, which are called hardbacks. If you want something more day-to-day that you can live with easier, then you want something like these sport seats. There's many adjustability trims on them. The control knobs will show you if there's lumbar support on them. The center console will also show you if there are heated seat options. For example, this one has the heated seats, so you can tell right away it does have heated seats. And if those are things that you're looking for, you know exactly what to look for. And more than anything, You want to look at the car and see what shape it is. We like looking at the paint, and you could go down a rabbit hole of paint. You just want to see that the car is in good shape, has original paint, or if there's any repairs, which is totally normal to find on these cars, has been done at the best quality. Best quality means you can't tell it was done. If I could tell it was done, it's because I'm really looking, but if most people can't tell, then I consider that a quality job. Tires are easy dead giveaway of how the car's been maintained. This particular example has Michelin Super Sport 4S's, which is kind of the best tire to have on this car. Continentals are also a great alternative, but you know, there are many, many tires out there. A lot of them are good, some of them are not, and you could kind of just get an idea what that looks like by just glancing at the car. You'll find a lot of talk in your research about these vehicles about the IMS bearing or rear main seal and such of the mechanical problems that these vehicles have. The truth is, on these generations, albeit 2006 and later, that IMS issue worry goes down if you've got a car that's been serviced correctly. What I mean by that is that the IMS bearing got beefier and way more resilient during these years, and there was a lot less failures than there usually was before. If the car's been serviced regularly, it's a great thing because you know it has fresh oil in it. Fresh oil means fresh internals. Fresh internals means that IMS bearing stayed clean and didn't get contaminated with water or those things that happen with oil when it gets old, broken down oil particles basically. One of the other things people discuss in this engines, the 3.8 in specific, is the bore scoring issues. If you have a bore scored engine, you'll have a ticking noise when you start them cold, and you'll also get misfire faults when it gets really bad. But more importantly, the best way to tell if a car has any scoring issues is when you're getting a pre-purchase inspection done, getting a compression test, and then looking down on the cylinder walls and make sure there are no score marks. Basically, no piston walls have been scratched on the interior of the engine. So it's a lot to digest, but anybody who's a specialist on these vehicles can easily address that by just doing what we call a compression and a bore scope test on it. We do that at Euro Prestige Imports. We like going very in-depth on these cars. We could go as in-depth or as light as you like. The beauty of us here is that if you just want me to walk around the car and give you my thoughts, I can, but if you want me to start tearing down into it, I could easily do that as well. Tearing a headlight apart or tearing some interior trim is a good definitive way for me to find out if there's any previous body work or if the car has had any water damage or any interior stuff that's happened to it. How much thoroughness you want in your pre-purchase inspection will determine what stage we go to. But typically speaking, on these vehicles you want to have a service history where the fluids have been taken care of, you know, transmission fluid, oil service history that's frequently done. Coolant service is usually going to happen when there's a water pump or the coolant reservoir has been replaced. The coolant reservoir sits on the left side of the engine and it's plastic, so it's common that they actually get cracky and brittle, and so you just replace them after a while. Albeit the 7-year mark is what the lifetime of them is, so that's a long time for that to happen. The crazy thing is, during this period, Porsche was saying to replace the oil once a year or every 15,000 miles. But we all know that that is probably the contributing factor to the IMS failing as much as they did. So the way we recommend avoiding that altogether is just do an oil change once a year or every 5,000 miles, whatever comes first. This will make sure your engine has clean oil at all times and there won't be any humidity or any oil breaking down that's happening inside your engine. 996 is said to change the oils every 15,000 miles. As soon as the car started failing on the IMS, they were like, no, every 10. As soon as it kept going on, they're like, hey, no, every 3,000. And you're like, wait, how did it go from a booklet of 15 to now 3? If you read the fine print, it says under extreme usage, then you do it by half that cycle. So you gotta look at and be honest with yourself how you're using your vehicle. If you're towing, if you're going to an 100-degree weather, if you're going in 40-degree weather, those are extreme circumstances. So you wanna do your oil changes every 5,000 miles or once a year. It's safe and easy, and it's cheap enough insurance to do your oil changes that way anyway. These vehicles will tell you what they need based on the shape of what it is. It's gotten to the point where they're now 10, 12, 15 years old. You want to just see what the car needs by looking at it. Sometimes you don't have service records, and that's okay. Sometimes the fluids look fresh and you might not have history of it. Sometimes they look like they've been done but many years ago and you want to address them now. If you're going to enjoy the car to the best that it's designed to be, you just want to take care of the cheap and easy stuff. Low-hanging fruit is always service. Maintenance is easy. Repairing is expensive. So what I always say is, if you're gonna buy the vehicle and the pre-purchase inspection finds brake fluid flush, great, that's not an immediate hurry. But if you find oil that's really old and smells like fuel or has water contamination in it, then you know you're looking at something more grave, and that might be a determining point to, if I'm gonna buy this vehicle, I'm gonna start doing the oil changes way more frequently than I'm supposed to, because I wanted to bring it back to normal, clean bill of health. The circumstances of the servicing on a vehicle are gonna be very much based on the vehicle. So if you drive it during stop and go traffic Your 50,000 miles are gonna be a lot harder than mine going on a highway without braking and accelerating every 50,000 miles. So being that you know that, you just inspect the car. If the bushings look great, you leave them alone. If the bushings have play or they're cracked, then you know you have to address them. If you're looking at something that needs addressing, the car will tell you. It's pretty much the gist of it. Around 50,000 miles, you do the spark plugs, and that'll be completely healthy for the vehicle. Stuff you can't see is always the worst. So like I said, cheap insurance is just replacing the fluids, replacing the spark plugs. If you don't know it's been done, just go ahead and save yourself the headache and get that done so you don't have to worry about it in the future. Tires, brakes, it'll show it to you, so if it needs to be done and they're worn down, you'll see it right away, so it's an easy thing to spot. So whether this be your first Porsche or you're looking to service your already owned Porsche, we're here to help. We are Euro Prestige Imports, and you can find us at europrestigeimports.com.